Hey, we're going to get started. I just want to welcome everybody here. Good turnout. Great turnout, actually. This is great. And this is kind of an idea that we dreamed up from, generated from the academic technology liaison meetings where, you know, a lot of the liaisons from each school and college that deal with technology meet every month, and we just never seem to have time to really dive down deeper into an application or an idea, so we're always sort of skimming over the top of topics. So Casey has been going to the last few academic technology liaison meetings. This is Casey Eyring from Institute on Disability, who's our featured speaker this month. So we kind of got together and said, well, let's come up with a new set of events. So what we're going to try to do, this is the first one, Tech Talks #1. We're going to try to do these every 2 months. We don't have a topic nailed down for the next one 2 months from now. So anybody here or that you know that would like to present, perhaps the format would be, you know, 2 sessions, 45 minutes each, that we could do something like that. But for this one, Casey's going to walk us through Active Directory group policy, kind of tips and tricks. Hope you all get some pizza. Thank you to the lovely, awesome Holly again for ordering lunch. You know, at any time we'll take questions. Or do you want to hold questions to the end?
No, I think we could probably just ask questions if you have them.
Okay.
See how it goes.
If you don't know me, I'm Marshall White, Academic Technology. If you have an idea for a tech talk, send me an email. So, oh, the other thing is we're trying to capture both screens and video and audio in Integrity and maybe a little Camtasia. We're going to edit it together later. So this will be available after the fact, I hope, maybe in a week. So, thanks.
Cool.
Thank you very much, Casey.
Thank you, Marshall. All right, cool. So I'm Casey. I work at the Institute on Disability over at West Edge. Been working there for a few years now, and I've done a lot of stuff with Active Directory and group policy, and so I thought it would be beneficial to share it with the larger UNH community. Big thank you to Marshall and Holly for handling the administrative tasks of getting this meeting set up. So I appreciate it. And, with that said, I guess we'll begin. All right. So I guess the first question that I would ask you is, what is Active Directory? Seems like a good place to start. And it's basically an accounts management system that was created by Microsoft. I think it may have actually been created by Novell, but then Microsoft bought Novell, and so now Microsoft owns it. AD accounts can either be user accounts or computer accounts. And so, like, let's say that, so what is an Active Directory account? When you log into AD, it's basically, you know, like CGZ2 or ABC123 or, you know, your first initial and then your last name, depending on how old your account is. That's what everyone's familiar with it in terms of Active Directory accounts, but there's also computer accounts too. So when you take your computer and you join it to the domain, there's also an account created, and I'm going to show you what that looks like in a little bit. But just know for the basic premise, there's user accounts and there's computer accounts. And there's also some other stuff like service accounts and stuff, but I won't go into that for brevity. So your ABC account is that AD account. Okay, so within this structure of user accounts and computer accounts, both of these can be organized hierarchically into organizational units. And an organizational unit is kind of like a folder. So what is an organizational unit? It's a container for OU objects, or for user and computer objects. And when I say that they can be grouped hierarchically, what I mean by that is they can be grouped either by functional or logical groups. So you'll have like the Paul College as an organizational unit, or COLSA or SEPS. We have an IOD-OU. And then within that, you can also have servers or workstations or kiosks, and however you'd like to organize it. It's basically up to you. By default, when you create a new user, it's placed in the users organizational unit, which is just something Microsoft has created. It's just where they go by default, and then computers go into the computers organizational unit. So I'm sure that if whoever has not seen this is probably confused and saying, what is he talking about? So I will actually pull up my screen here. I'm going to pull up a tool called Active Directory Users and Computers. We'll just put that over here. But this is basically AD. So within AD, we have all of these different organizational units. So in here you can see that we have a COLSA OU, we have a COLA OU, we have a SEPS OU. Here is my OU that I maintain. And within it we have these sub-organizational units. So we have staff computers, we have public computers, we have servers. And these are the various different objects. So like if we were to go into the staff laptops, these are all of the laptops that exist that I basically maintain. And these are all computer accounts. Likewise, if we go into our users organizational unit, here's all of the people that work for the Institute on Disability. Okay, so what is group policy? Basically, it's a way to manage a group of AD objects, such as users and computers. You can control security settings, screensavers, map network drives, deploy software, etc. Basically, anything that you can manage on your own machine in Windows, you can probably manage it through group policy. There's about 8,000 different settings, and you can actually expand these through group policy templates. So like there's ADMX templates for Microsoft Office or for Link, and so you can actually download these templates and then install them and then manage settings on group policy using those templates, which is nice. One of the important concepts of group policy is that it doesn't matter if you're managing 10 computers or 10,000 computers, the effort required is theoretically the same. So, you know, to install a piece of software or to install a printer on 10 computers in the lab is the same as installing that same printer in, you know, 40 different labs, because it's really just clicking a few buttons in the administrative end. So this has a very good potential to scale very large and basically save you a lot of time. So why group policy? So why do we use group policy? Basically, the idea is to reduce the total cost of ownership. So the total cost of ownership looks at the entire life cycle costs of the computer. So it doesn't mean just purchasing it and then decommissioning it. It also means maintenance. So when we talk about group policy, we're interested in reducing the maintenance costs. You know, just as an example, let's say that you have 100 computers in a lab and all of them need UNH secure. I'm sure you've ran into that problem before, whichever you guys manage, whoever manages labs or computers on campus here. So how do you do it? One way would be to go around manually and run the Cloud Path tool on every single machine, which probably takes 5 or 10 minutes per machine. Or you could just use group policy to deploy it to your organizational unit. Once you do that, all of your computers will have UNH secure and it'll just work. So that's just one example of how you can basically save yourself a lot of time to do this kind of stuff. And you can do the same thing with printers or software, security settings, etc. Okay, so review. So basically, so far, what I want you guys to know is Active Directory is an account system. Accounts can be user objects or computer objects, and group policy settings are applied to Active Directory objects via group policy objects. I haven't actually gone over that yet, but I will show you that now. Are there any questions so far? It's pretty straightforward, right? Okay, cool. So what is a group policy object? It's basically a collection of settings that's going to be applied to a group of AD users, and computers. There's two theories when it comes to managing group policy objects, monolithic versus functional. So a monolithic would be like, I have my, over here, say that I have my Colsa OU or my Cola OU, and I'm just going to manage everything within one group policy object. So actually, you know, I'm going to pull up something different here. Call it my group policy management console. So let me just take a step back for a second here. Just like the Active Directory users and computers tool, there's another half of the equation called group policy management, and that looks like this tool over here. And basically, this is how you manage GPOs or group policy objects. So if you notice, it looks very similar to the Active Directory tool, where I have my domain here, and then I have all of these different organizational units. And within those organizational units, I have different group policy objects. So these guys in here are actually the GPOs that contain all of the different settings. So doesn't look like these guys are using it. Okay, so I basically took a functional methodology to applying this, and I kind of like the functional better. Functional basically means that you take each kind of setting that you have and you create a new group policy object for that setting. So let's say that I wanted you know, a new set of map drives for my user, or I just wanted map drives for my users. I created a group policy object here called IOD maps drives, and then configured those settings within that. Now this has a little bit, and I'd say a little bit, it's a very, very slight performance hit versus a monolithic, but there's really no right way to do this. It's all about you know, what works best for you. I tend to prefer the functional way of doing things because it's easier to troubleshoot. So if you come up with a new group, if you create a new group policy object and some new settings, and all of a sudden like half your computers stop working, it's easy to just disable that single group policy object that you just created rather than try to troubleshoot something that's just like a conglomerate of all these different settings. So how you guys manage that is up to you, but that's the method that I've taken and it seems to work well for us. So group policy objects can be filtered by a specific account, security groups, organizational unit, or WMI filter. So if you notice here, I've got all of these different group policy objects within my IODOU. These group policy objects will apply to everything within the every single AD object within the IOD's OU here, as well as anything downstream. So meaning computers, staff, IOD tests. Well, it won't apply to that, but laptops and printers, etc. Some of these are restricted by groups. So if I click on new software and I go to new software group here, this is only going to apply to these specific computers. So if you have you know, specific computers that need to get like a printer or a piece of software and you don't want it to apply to every single computer, one way to do that would be to create a security group and then have the group policy object apply just to that security group. Another thing that you can do is you can apply WMI filters, and basically what that means is, let's say that you wanted to apply let's say that you wanted to install SPSS on all machines that were 64-bit Windows 7 with 8 gigs of RAM and 20 gigs of hard disk space. Something very, very specific. You could use a WMI filter for that. And it's basically, that allows you to be as specific as you want, and you can basically choose, like, just query the machine for whatever it is that you want to query it for and use that to install it. You know, what is its IP address? What is its MAC address? You know, there's like a whole list of different things that you can get specific on if you wanted to filter that way. Just a word of caution, WMI filters take up a lot of processing power, so use them sparingly. So, you don't want to have a whole bunch of group policy objects that use WMI filters unless you really need it. If there's another way to do it, like security groups or something, that's probably a better way. And then also, GPOs can be inversely applied, meaning I can say apply this GPO to authenticated users, which means computers and users, but don't apply it to a specific software group, or don't apply it to a specific security group, because maybe you don't want 3 computers in your lab having that printer installed or something like that. Question?
It's interesting you say that the WMI filtering has processing head. Makes sense. Have you used, or I would imagine a good way to use it would be for maybe a temporary, like you want to deploy some software, and so you would set this up as a temporary WMI filter, target your audience, get it out there, and then remove that, and it's not there.
Yeah, you could definitely do that. That's not a bad idea at all.
And does it do, you were saying that you could target like it has this operating system, it has this hard drive, can you say greater than?
Yep. So I can't actually change these things. This is something that the AD, I can't actually create OUs, and I can't create WMI filters in here. That's something that the AD accounts group needs to do for you. But I can show you what it looks like, because in group policy, when I edit a GPO here, there's a way for specific settings to be targeted. So you have that, just the entire group policy object will apply. But WMI filtering looks like this. So let's say that I wanted to create a user, I don't know, a local user, admin. Sure, we'll just delete admin. It's a terrible idea, but item level targeting. This will allow you to apply WMI filtering on a individual setting. But basically, if you look in here, you can see battery present, computer name, CPU speed, so disk space. If it's greater than 80 gigs free on C, then apply this. And it's basically, it's super flexible. So like IP address range, if it's within a specific IP address, then make this the default printer, because they're going to be on that subnet. Or if they're in like another site, then maybe you just want those printers installed there. So it's really flexible. You can pretty much do anything that you wanted. A registry match, so you could use registry match to see if there's some other specific piece of software that's installed that's a prerequisite. However you guys want to use it, it's pretty flexible. Any other questions?
I just want to throw out a point of order for questions. Thank you, Laura, for asking a question, and just for the rest of Tech Talks for now until infinity, questions are encouraged. All questions are encouraged. There are no stupid questions. If I find anyone's acting like a smarty pants or too geeky, you will have 1 warning. 2nd warning, no pizza. 3rd warning, you're tossed out. Right? All questions are open. Thank you.
Thanks, Marshall. Okay, cool. So creating a GPO, I kind of just went through that a little bit, but let me talk about the process to create a GPO. Within your organizational unit, so if you guys don't already have organizational units set up, basically what you'll want to do is you'll want to contact Sally Nickerson's group or the AD Accounts group and have them create an OU for you. And then you kind of want to just lay it out on paper, like, I want this lab to be an OU, I want this lab to be a different OU, I want my staff to have an OU, I want my servers, whatever. But once you do that, then you're going to have these different objects, these different group policy objects within those different OUs. And just to show you what an actual OU looks like, I'm going to go ahead. So once the AD Accounts group creates the group policy object, you're just going to go in and edit it, and it'll just be a blank GPO for starters. But I'm gonna do this one right here. So I clicked edit, and it opened up on this screen over here. But basically what I want you guys to look at and see is that there's a computer setting and there's a computer configuration and a user configuration. The computer configurations will apply to that computer or any computers that are in that organizational unit, and the user settings will apply to any user that logs on to, it will apply to any user that is within that organizational unit. So any of my employees, any of the IOD's employees, regardless of where they log on campus, will get settings designated for them within this user configuration. So they'll get map drives, they'll get shortcuts, they'll get all of that kind of stuff as long as the computer is on a domain, which is kind of cool. And then computer configuration just applies to that local machine. Just got policy versus preferences. So within each of the computer and user configurations, you'll see that there's a policies group of settings and a preferences. The difference here is that users cannot change policies regardless of how hard they try. It's set in a specific part of the registry that is just locked and unable to be accessed by the user. Preferences basically reapply themselves every 90 minutes. So preferences are things like desktop shortcuts or maybe like a registry tweak, something that the user, if they knew what they were doing or really wanted to, could override it. Or like, in the case of a desktop shortcut, maybe you want them to be able to override it because you don't want to force it there, and maybe they don't like their desktop cluttered, so you make it a preference. But that's basically the difference between these things. These things the users cannot control. These things they either can control if they know what they're doing, or they can easily remove it.
You said it refreshed every 45 minutes?
Every 90 minutes.
Every 90 minutes. Now, what refreshed is your desktop or the settings inside here?
Yep. So I'm actually I'll get back to that in a little bit because we're gonna talk about domain controllers and how that stuff is set up. But basically, every 90 minutes, your computer will contact the domain controller and say, "Give me the policy settings for my computer," and so it'll just download them and reapply them.
So if I do change my desktop under that, 90 minutes later, it's going to wipe it out.
That's correct.
And give me that again.
Yep. And I think security settings actually refresh every 15 minutes. And security settings would be like zone mapping rules and stuff like that, and just whatever Microsoft considers a security policy. And it's possible to change that kind of stuff to in-group policy so that you can have it update every 30 minutes instead of every 90 minutes. But just the default that Microsoft sends it to you is 90 minutes.
And this is also the case if someone's an admin on the machine?
Yep.
If those aren't okay.
Yep. Cool. ADMX templates, I talked about that a little bit earlier briefly, but ADMX templates allow you to expand the range of settings that you have in group policy management. So I actually installed some ADMX templates for Microsoft Office. So like some of the things I can do here, I don't know if I can read this. Security settings, disable package repair, disable VBA for Office applications. So like if you wanted to disable VBA on all of your users' machines, you could just go in here, open this up, say that this is enabled, and then none of your users, none of the objects that this GPO applies to will be able to run VBA on those machines. So it's a really good way of securing all of your desktops. Let's talk about precedence and link order. I realize that this is like a lot of information. I'll try to give like some notes, and I'll share the PowerPoints after with all you guys. And this will be recorded too, so you can watch it again. But precedence and link order. Basically, when I click on a group policy object here, you'll see this link order thing. This is a list of all of the different group policy objects that will apply to this OU. And the way that precedence works is it will always start with the top level domain. So it'll always start with ad.unh.edu, and it'll apply these specific group policy objects to everything, to every domain computer. Then it'll look at the IOD, and then it'll say, okay, apply these to all of the IOD computers, and it will do so in this order. So, I'm sorry, it will actually do it in reverse order. So let's say that you have a group policy object down here that says create a local administrator account with the password test, and then up here you have a group policy object that says delete that same user account. The account will get created and then it will get deleted. And so that's just important to know. Like if you have conflicting policy settings, it basically just goes up the chain of command. It applies everything starting with the last one, and then it overwrites whatever's there. And then as you go down the chain, basically once these are all applied, then the next thing it'll do is it'll go into the specific OU that computer is based on, and it will apply those GPOs. So does that make sense to everyone? Is that clear? All right, cool. Blocked and forced GPOs. So let's say that you wanted to let's say that you wanted to test out a new policy setting, but you didn't want it to interfere with any of your existing group policy objects. What you can do is you can create a blocked GPO, or let's just say that you have like a whole bunch of settings and you want to create another OU within your organizational unit, but you don't want it to receive any settings. Maybe it's like for servers or something, and it just shouldn't receive all this other stuff. Basically what you can do is create a blocked GPO. And here I have IOD test blocked, and I just use this to test new computers that I don't want receiving any of the other settings. But basically it's not going to get any of this stuff because it's in a blocked GPO. This prevents any GPOs from applying downstream into this OU. Likewise, let's say that UNH says that, hey, I want all computers to have a secure password policy. Guess what? They're going to make them forced. And if you notice that this says that it's enforced, that means that every single computer on campus that's joined a domain is getting this policy setting regardless of whether or not you block it or not. So you can force GPOs downstream, and you can also block them from being inherited, but forced GPOs will always get forced down regardless of what anybody will do. You just have to accept it. Filtering, I think we kind of already talked about that. Filtering is basically security filtering. You can apply to security groups, so you can use WMI filtering, etc. Caveats. So GPOs can take up to 95 minutes to apply to a user or computer. And like I discussed earlier, I'll explain a little bit, but that's because of domain controllers. So the amount of time that it takes to contact the domain controller is 90 minutes. And then there's several domain controllers, and they all replicate against each other. So like if the primary domain controller goes down, let me just show you what that looks like on the diagram here. So this is probably what UNH's network looks like. Probably not this bad, but basically you've got a primary domain controller that's like ad.unh.edu, and then you've got backup. So this might be like walnut.ad.unh.edu, etc. You can see the different domain controllers in here. So we've got butternut, we've got driftwood, we've got ironwood, and we've got walnut. So basically those are the different, they all replicate against each other. So when you save a setting, if you're like off campus and it happens to be connected to like a different domain controller, when you're editing the settings, it may take up to 5 minutes to replicate across the other domain controllers if you're trying to apply a setting like somewhere else. So just be aware that there may be like a 5-minute delay, so it may not take effect immediately. Settings will also only take place after 2 or 3 restarts. So why is this? Back in, I think it was either Windows XP or Windows Vista, Microsoft came out with a way to change the way that settings were applied to group policy objects in order to speed up the computer boot time. So basically what you have is you have two options. One of them is called synchronous processing and the other is asynchronous processing. So Vista introduced asynchronous processing, which means that when you log into your computer, it's going to download the group policy objects. It's not until you restart the computer that it's going to actually apply those. So it downloads it first and then it applies them. And depending on whether or not, depending on how long it takes for it to download all that stuff, could mean that it's going to take either two or three restarts to actually apply. Certain settings, like user security settings, will take place immediately as soon as they're applied. So they'll be downloaded and they'll be applied within like 15 minutes. Other things like map drives will not apply to the user until they log off and log back in, and that's because you don't want to disrupt their workflow in the middle of their user session. So certain things apply on a restart, and certain things just apply immediately. It just depends on which setting it is. If you're using a test environment, there's actually a setting called I don't remember what it's called, but it's always wait for the network or something like that. But it's basically synchronous processing. So you can actually tell it that every time my computer starts up, I want it to check the domain controller for new group policy objects. I want it to download all of those, and then I want it to apply them. And if you did that, then you wouldn't need this 2 or 3 restarts. It would just do it every single time. The only issue is that you're going to get users that are waiting a little bit longer in order to do that. Does that make sense? Cool. All right, so how do we actually use this stuff? First thing you want to do is join a domain. Most of you guys are probably familiar with it, but I'm going to go through the process of joining computers to domains in case you're not. So the first thing you want to do is UNH's domain is ad.unh.edu. You want to make sure that both the wired and wired interfaces are connected and registered to the network. So you go to reg.unh.edu or techreg.unh.edu, and then what you want to do is just want to open up a command prompt and make sure that you can ping ad.unh.edu. Then unplug your Ethernet cable and then turn on the wireless and do the same thing. Because if it can't reach ad.unh.edu, it's just your policies are not going to work because it can't download them from the domain controller. But as soon as they're registered to the network, it'll work fine. It's best to use a hardwire Ethernet for the initial join. If you set up UNH Secure through group policy using computer-based authentication, it'll just always be on the network and you don't have to worry about whether or not it's connected in the future to a hardwire. It'll just work. Other tip is to create the computer account before joining. So let's go ahead and actually join a computer to the domain here. So I'm going to open up a virtual machine. Okay. So while this is starting. Also, a good way to test new group policy objects is to just create, I like to use VirtualBox, and I just have a couple different machines in here. I have a 32-bit Windows 7 machine and a 64-bit Windows 7 machine. If you have XP machines or Windows 8, you can create those too. But I just have these computers created in that test OU, and whenever I try to set up a new policy, I just kind of play with the GPOs and just apply them to these virtual machines and then see if they work and troubleshoot any problems before deploying it to all of the users. So, how do I actually join a domain? So, I've got this computer here. You basically click on the Start menu. You right click, you go to Properties, and you'll notice that this computer is not yet on the domain. It just has Workgroup. The first thing that I want to do before I actually join it is I want to create the account here, because remember earlier we talked about how computer accounts automatically get created in this computers OU. We don't want that. We want it to just, we don't want the AD accounts people to have to move stuff. So what you can do is you can just right click in your OU, say new computer. I'll actually put it in this one. Say new computer. And we'll just call it Tech Tips. Actually, we'll call it Tech Tips. Tech Tips 1. Okay, so now I have a Tech Tips 1 computer. Now I'm going to join this computer. I'm just going to call it Tech Tips 1. And we're going to put this on the domain. Says welcome to the domain. Okay. And then it's going to need to restart your computer. So let's go ahead and restart it. While we're doing that, I'm going to show you guys, let's create just a setting in here for this to use. Unless there's one already in here. Alright, so there's just a couple settings in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a desktop shortcut icon. So I'm going to do that under Windows settings. I'm going to go to shortcuts. I'm going to say new shortcut. UNH. We will replace it. So there's the difference in here is create, replace, update, or delete. Create will create it if it does not exist. If it does exist, it won't touch it. Replace will create it if it doesn't exist and replace it if it does exist. So it'll just overwrite whatever's there. Update will only update the URL. It will only update that shortcut if it already exists. So if there's already a UNH icon on your desktop, it'll update it. If it doesn't exist, it just won't do anything. And then delete is obvious; it just deletes it. So we'll say that this goes to unh.edu. And so maybe you want this, maybe you want to create shortcuts to your local help desk or the UNH help desk or contact information, whatever.
Or the VPN, for instance.
Or the VPN, yep. So you can put the UNH VPN URL there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to this guy over here, and I'm going to restart it again. Do this. So the other thing that I turned on was there's verbose messages in here, and that just it doesn't say just please wait. It says like, oh, it's applying, like it's installing Spiceworks client, it's deploying printers, so it says applying computer settings right now, and you can see how it went through that, and it gave me a useful message. When I first started doing this and I was troubleshooting, I found that it just saying please wait was not very helpful, because sometimes it would just say that for like 20 minutes and you would have no idea what it was getting hung up on. So you can enable that verbose messaging and it'll tell you exactly what it's doing, and you'd be like, alright, this is getting stuck.
I was curious with something that you do. Do you only do that personally in testing and then take off the verbose as you apply it, or have you found the customers like to see what's happening so they understand why it might be taking time?
I just left it on, and it's useful because like when people call me up, they say my computer's just like hung up or something like that, and they're like, okay, what does it say? And if it says like a specific message, you can be like, oh well, okay, I know how to fix that. Versus if it just says please wait, it's not very useful. So yeah, I've just left it on and people haven't really noticed. Most of the things that you do, users don't notice, so works pretty well. Alright, so I'm gonna log in here. And if all worked well, I should have a desktop shortcut on my desktop called UNH, just a UNH. And I'm also going to get other, maybe I will. I don't know if I'll get the other settings. Let's see. And since this is the first time I'm logging into this machine, it's just going to take longer, obviously. But no, it did not apply. restart it enough times or something. But one of the ways that you can force a computer to update is by running the gp update command. So it's just gp update, and that will go through and update all of your settings. Why it didn't apply that specific setting, I don't know. One of the things that you can do when you're troubleshooting is run a command called gp result. Not sure if this is going to work. So if we type gp result, result.html, basically what this is going to do is going to export an HTML file into my C drive called result.html. And I can see what settings that this particular computer got. And so if I go down here, I can see the IOD test blocked 1 GPO was applied. And if I look down here at the settings, all this was successful. Group policy objects applied. We're in the user settings, computer configuration settings. These are all of the stuff that came from UNH regarding password complexity requirements. Shortcuts, the following settings applied. I'm not sure why it didn't apply. So it's one of the things you got to do is you just kind of got to test stuff. You know, I've never actually applied. I don't think I've ever applied a shortcut to a computer object. I usually just do it to user accounts. But basically, it thinks it applied it, so I'm not sure why it didn't. But anyways, so that's that. Joining a domain, create the computer account. Yeah. All right. So let's talk about how do you get. Here, I'm going to log back in as a local administrator here. I'm going to do one thing. I'm going to move this GPO. I'm going to move this computer account now. Let's say that I'm done setting this up or whatever, and I just want to move it into so it gets all of my other accounts. Basically, these are now it's in my my main OU. I'm going to restart that computer. Restart twice, and it should get all of the other settings that are destined for the IODOU, such as software and printers and all of that stuff. So let's see if it works this time. Cool. So it's applying all this stuff that's set up for my particular computers within our organizational unit. So that is working. One of the things I've done too is I've set it up so that my user account and our backup IT guy are automatically administrators on all these computers. So it's kind of useful to just say, you know, you don't have to go into computer management and manually like set everyone as an administrator. They're just automatically admins.
And the end user can't reverse that, which is the issue.
Yes, that's correct. Right, because it'll reapply every 15 minutes if they do that. So I'm just logging in as my setup account. Another thing that I found helpful is to have a secondary account that I use just to set up profiles, just to set up new machines. So I've got this this secondary user account that actually has a redirected desktop. So as soon as I log in here, you'll see that I have a bunch of stuff that I would normally need for. It looks like it's installing updates. Thank you, Microsoft. But basically what I do is I have a secondary account, and on that account I have like scripts that I run and links to software installation images and stuff like that. So everything's all in one place. It's specific to setting up a new computer. So it's really, really fast. It takes me like 25 minutes to set up a new computer and just give it to the user. So it's really, really quick. As soon as this starts up, I'm going to show you how to install the remote server administration tools. Maybe I can just, well, let's see what else we got in here in the meantime. Oh, good. So it installed a bunch of stuff. It looks like it did not redirect my desktop. I think I just changed the setting on that like last week, so that may be why. But basically, let's say that we wanted to install the remote server administration pack. So it looks like it's still applying stuff. Basically what you need to do, so let's say that you want to set up all this stuff and you want to download and install these tools onto your computer. What do you need to do? Just go into Google and type in RSAT, which is Remote Server Administration Tools, and just download the first link. Okay, you want to download it for whatever computer you're using. So if it's a 64-bit machine, download the 64-bit package. If it's a 32-bit machine, download the x86 package. I've already downloaded it onto the other account. So let's just actually log off. Are there any questions so far? No?
I kind of have a question, although this may,
Sure.
I don't have lots of questions, but this may be best answered later, because I was curious what people did, or if people did anything to correlate user accounts with computer accounts. Do they do anything manually, adding this to notes? Are there tools out there that people use to kind of keep track of how those two pair together to create a relationship?
One of the things that I've found successful is to just name the computer after the user. So if you click on laptop staff, these 74 IOD means that it's an IOD computer. 74 means that it's a E7440 machine, and then I just have the first initial of their name, and then their as much as their last name will fit. Up
So
to
you
15
use a
characters.
naming policy?
Yes, I
that
do.
you follow.
Yep.
Is that what most other people do?
I mean, we do a UNH dash username, and then we'll put like the computer model in the description.
Yeah, and there's actually a way you can actually script joining the domain, joining a computer domain using PowerShell. So if you have a bunch of computers, you may just want to take like a USB stick and put it on and just run it off the USB stick to automatically join the domain. It's just a double click and then do it. A couple other tricks too I found handy. When I first started, none of the computers were in an organizational unit. They were just in the computers OU. So what I did is I created a script that would, and I applied it to all of our users because I knew who our users were. And the script would basically take the name of the computer and then write it into a text file on our file server. And then I would just go through and I would say, okay, all of these users are basically logging into these machines. So I just took that list of machines and I just said, okay, these are our computers. You know, obviously I checked to make sure it wasn't like the cluster, but most of the computers had like, were named like IOD something, so it was fairly easy. But basically that way I didn't have to walk around to 100 different computers and say, hey, what's your computer name? I just used a script to do it and saved a lot of time.
If you're using Config Manager, you can also, there's a user device affinity report you can run. So if the machines are managed in Config Manager, you can run that report and it'll tell you which log corresponds to which computers.
Cool. Great question. Thank you for the comment as well. Okay, so how do I install remote server administration tools? Basically, after you've downloaded it, you're going to want to just run the little package update script. Takes a minute or two. And then it's just going to go through and install this. And we may or may not need to restart, I'm not sure. So some of the demonstration things I could do for you guys today include doing these things, or if there's anything specific that you guys want to see. I'd like to be able to give you guys like some like useful stuff that you could be like, oh yeah, I'd love to go out and deploy my printers today or something like that. Is there anything specific you guys want to see that you're interested in learning how to do? Or should I just go through them?
Yeah, I think the examples you have in there are pretty good.
Okay, cool. So,
These are printers too.
sure, printers are super easy. There's a couple ways to do printers too. I know Stormy has said that he likes to use the group policy preferences. I've found a lot of luck with just using the deployed printers. So how many of you guys are printing through Han?
Would it be too much trouble to switch?
Yeah, sure, we could do that. Oops.
I don't know if for recording purposes you have you use it to put it that way.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
It's easier to see on the screen.
Tell you what, how about I just put this over this?
Perfect.
Okay. So how do we set up a printer? So let's set up a printer. Basically what you would do is you go into this area over here. So we'd edit the group policy that the 80 accounts admins have set up for us. We'd go in and we'd say policies, I think it's under Windows settings, deployed printers. You'd say deploy printer, and then you just can browse for it, I think. So if it's already set up on Han, which is like a big print server on campus, you'd just say go to Han, and then you'd select your printer. So if we wanted to get, I don't know if this will work because I don't know if I have permission, but hockey, you'd say add, you'd say okay, and then now basically all of your computers that this group policy object applies to will have the hockey printer installed. It's really pretty quick and simple and easy to use. And if you guys don't use Han, you can just email like Bodette or Printing and Mail Services, and they'll install the printer for you. Most of the Xerox printers should be on there, but that's pretty much all you need to do. The other way you can do it, which I don't know, maybe I'll show you. I've had problems with this; it's been problematic, but you can also install it through group policy preferences, and this like lets you say that I want to do a TCP/IP printer and all this stuff. But that's a little bit more than it needs to be. I found that this is just super easy and just works. Installing software can be a little bit tricky. Typically the best way to do it would just be to, I usually just say like, I do a Google search for deploy whatever. So basically let's say that you wanted to deploy Link 2013. Every program is different, but basically you can just go through here and say, how do I do it? And then, this looks way too confusing. I'll deploying link. Or what you just search is deploying link via group policy. And this will basically tell you how to do it. Basically what you want is you want a file share on your network, like an SMB share, that can host all of your software, and it'll be and make sure that it's accessible to everyone, and that the NTFS permissions are also set to allow domain computers and domain users to access it. And once you've got that set up, basically when the computer turns on, it will install any software that you have set up doing this. So it looks like the process for deploying link is to actually create a batch script and then run the batch script, which would mean that we would have to go into where is it? Basically it would be in the policies, I think it's Windows settings, scripts.
The policies we just
Oh, it's a policy site, okay, thank you. Policy script, so you just have to create a bash script and add it in here. Other stuff is much easier to do. Sometimes you have to create an administrative install. So what I mean by that is, let me create got the downloads thing in here. So SpiceWorks agent, that's something I downloaded earlier. The way that you create an administrative install is you open up an elevated command prompt. So you can't see me, but I just did CMD. I opened up an elevated command prompt. Now what you want to do is you want to go type in and what you do is you run MSI-EXEC, which is the Microsoft installer. It's just basically on every single Windows machine. You type in the name of the file, and then you type in /A for an administrative install. Oh, I'm sorry, it's correct. Language is /A. Okay, and then it's going to open up the installer just like it would normally. And you can put in all of your settings here, so it'd be like, whatever your SpiceWorks server address is or whatever. This is just the install client for SpiceWorks. If you're installing like Link or something like that, it's obviously not going to have these options. It may be something different. But basically, you go through the normal software installation routine for your product. But rather than installing it to this computer right here, it's just going to install it onto the server somewhere. Test, whatever. And then basically where it says this, enter a new network location, this is where you want to install it on a network share somewhere. So you put in like IOD FS1 / whatever your server is, and then it will go through and it'll actually create all of those like installation files and put them in a folder that's required. So here I can actually, let's do it on IOD server software / didn't like that path because I didn't have an E. let's just do this software deploy / SW test. So it goes through and installs that. You just hit finish. And it created my SW test. And it created an MSI file, and then it just puts all of the files that it's actually going to need, like a normal install. So how do I actually add this to my group policy object? Basically, go in here and I say software. Well, I can do two things. I can install it based on the user that's logging in, or I can install it based on the computer that I'm logging into. I typically install software to computers, just because I found it easier, and maybe if the person's logging into the library, they don't really need the software, but just be aware that you can install it to users and computers. You go in here and you'd say new package, and then you'd select that deployment thing, so SW test, SW agent. Published means that it's available, so they can actually go into the control panel, and there's this thing in there which most people are probably not aware of, but if you go into programs and features, there's this thing called install program from the network. If you click that, it would actually list anything that is that is published. It would allow you to do that. But assign means that it's just going to install it. Advanced gives you some advanced configuration options. As soon as we go here, so you can rename it, you can do upgrades, etc. You can have it automatically uninstall the application when it falls out of the scope of management. So what does that mean? It means if this group policy object no longer applies to this computer because maybe you moved it into a different OU, or the group policy object gets disabled or something like that, if that box is checked, it will just uninstall the program. So depending on what you're installing, that may or may not be very helpful. You can upgrade stuff, and security you don't really ever have to touch. It's just the default kind of just works. I hit cancel instead of OK, but normally as soon as I hit OK there, it would just list the package. It would just put it right here. And then when any computer that this group policy object was assigned to was restarted, it would basically, on startup, it would say installing Spiceworks Agent 7.0, and then it would just go ahead and install it. So I'm going to remove this now. When you remove a piece of software, you can have it uninstall it immediately, or you can the second option is just to leave it on all the computers. Question?
You were talking about the two ways to deploy software to computers, either a computer setting or a user setting, and you brought up the fact that if a user if you do it via user, and they log in someplace unanticipated, it could suddenly install the software. Do you know if the AD admins have a recommendation to try not to deploy software using user configuration, or like a best policy that people should follow for that?
I don't know.
I mean, that would seem like maybe your users are very they stay in one spot.
Yeah.
But I would think that if you deploy something for users and they move around a lot, it could cause problems on other people's computers.
Probably, and that's probably why I've stuck to computer installations. The other thing is I don't know how it works with permissions. I don't know if the user has to be an administrator in order for it to install. There's a good chance that they would. So like if they're logging in over here at the library, they're probably not an admin on the machine, so that may cause issues as well. For I think all of the software that I've deployed, it's been through a computer-based policy. The other thing too is that you can use Configuration Manager to deploy stuff. That's something we may do later. I found software deployment through group policy to be sometimes it's super easy and sometimes it's just not even worth it. It really depends on what it is that you're trying to deploy. We use a remote support software client thing that gets installed on all the computers, and it's literally just download the MSI, and you don't even need to run an administrative install. You just add the MSI into here, and it just works. It's super easy. So depending on who you're what the vendor is set up, sometimes it's super easy to deploy software, and sometimes it's super problematic and painful. Sometimes you have to like deal with installing EXEs, because this will only install MSI files. If you're trying to install an EXE, you have to use a script, or you can use Configuration Manager, which I have not yet used. But you know, just keep that in mind. So like, if you search like the product you're trying to install, like deploying link via group policy, and that you see like a pretty straightforward way to do it, just go ahead and do it via group policy. But if it like looks super problematic, then I probably wouldn't bother. So that would be my advice.
Casey, another question.
Yep.
A comment. First of all, let me echo the fact that software deployment is vastly easier with ConfigMan. But to your comment about installing as a user, another consideration can be the size of the software that you're installing. So if you're going to install it for the user and it's going to install when they log in, and it's MATLAB or something that's huge, it could really lengthen their login at that time. So they have to download that from the network and do the whole installation in the few seconds that they're logging in. So they might not log in for a minute and a half or whatever.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I think that when you're logging in as as a user too, I think there's an option in here to make it available. No, when you publish, I think when you publish, I don't know how this works. There's a way to make it so that it will show the desktop shortcut as if it were installed, but it won't actually install it until they try to click on that link, and then it'll go through and install it. I've never used it, again, and you do want to be careful with the login time, because if you're installing MATLAB, it's going to take a long time. But thank you for that comment. What else do we have on our list here? I already showed you how to create a shortcut, even though it didn't work. So I apologize for that. I'll have to figure out why that didn't work.
What about wireless installation?
Sure. So wireless is it's a computer-based setting. It's under security settings, and then wireless network policies. And so you basically just go in here and you'd say create a new wireless network policy for, I think it's Windows Vista and later releases. In fact, I'm just going to open up my thing because it was so long ago since I set this up. So policies, Windows, security settings, wireless network policies, and then it just creates this default wireless networks here. And then basically what you got to do, and I have instructions too that I can just email you guys. I'll include it as part of the notes, how to go through this. But you basically just add, I think it's an infrastructure, and then you put in the names of the SSIDs, and then for security you say it's like WPA2 Enterprise. You say it's WPA2 Enterprise AES, and then it's just, you got to go through and just check these specific settings. I don't remember. I basically just looked at what the Cloud Path tool configured for the wireless network, and then I just replicated it in group policy, and fortunately it worked. And so like all of the computers just automatically connect at computer as a computer. So I also selected computer authentication here, not user. And that way that as soon as the computers turn on, they just automatically connect to UNH Secure, and you don't ever have to worry about that Cloud Path tool. And it's super, super fast and it just works. Yeah. So I'll send out instructions, but that's basically where you go to add that. Is that clear?
So what kind of authentication is that doing? The computer user authentication or the computer authentication that you use credentials for?
Yep. So remember in AD how we have both computer objects and user objects. It basically uses the computer AD object to authenticate against the network. At least that's my understanding. So it actually uses the computer's account to authenticate the
So as
network.
long as the computer's on the domain.
Yep, as long as the computer is on the domain, that computer will work. And the nice thing about that is that there's a few nice things. One is that the user does not need to be hardwired into the network in order to get like new software or printers or stuff like that, because it will connect to the network, then it will apply the group policy settings over the wireless network. If the computer is not connected to the wireless network, then none of that computer half of the group policy object gets applied, which can be very problematic. But with this, it just automatically gets applied, which is nice. The other issue this resolves is when new users are logging in. Plug in my laptop here. Looks like it's dying. When new users are logging into the computer, it'll just well, as long as it's giving me something. When you log in as a new user, you won't get that error message that says like network or domain controller cannot be found or whatever it says, because it'll already be connected. So you don't need to like cache the credentials on a hardwire. Anybody can just log in over wireless and it just works, which is super convenient.
CloudPath, I thought that application had a component where it was getting the appropriate radius certificate. And how does this deal with this?
Yep. So I was just ignoring certificates for a while, and Stormy had actually got it working with the certificate. So I haven't actually looked at that yet. I would like to meet with you to go over that. But basically, I'm sure that you can import certificates using group policy. I'm sure that it can be set up to do that. If you want to,
First of all, you can download the certificates if you go under other computers in the network security help. The certificates are actually available for download from networking.UNH. Any view with the VPN help is down there. Not the other, the compound tool. And then I believe it's not there.
Yep.
So you want to cancel all that.
Okay.
I think it's in public key policies. There you go, trusted root certification authorities.
Where am I looking?
Right up the
Oh, there we go. Okay, cool.
Import, and then you put them in.
Okay, so that's how you do it.
And then you have to go back in there and tell it to trust, and that's the part that I forgot. You go back
Gotcha.
into the thing and tell it to actually trust the certificate.
Okay, cool. So you probably go into like advanced
You're
here.
in public instead of a.
Okay. Yeah, so you probably go into advanced and you'd say
Nope.
no
Properties.
properties. Okay, and then you just check it off.
Check it off. I
Okay.
think it's the lowercase, the weight one.
Okay,
That sounds good.
cool. So I'll include I'll write up some instructions for you guys.
That would be awesome.
And then send it to you. Cool. And the other thing too that like a lot of this stuff I feel would be helpful for UNH to just maintain, and then you could just link the GPO to your OU. So I don't know who at UNH would be like responsible for doing that, but like it would make sense to just have UNH maintain a UNH wireless networks GPO up here, or not even up here, just have it available, and then basically you would just link it to your organizational unit, and then that way you wouldn't even have to worry about it. It would just UNH would deal with it, and that to me seems like the appropriate way to do. But I don't know who we talk to about getting that set up, but we could talk about that later, I guess. Anyhow, so that was wireless. The other thing is map network drives. It's pretty straightforward. You just go in here and you'd say computer, or this is a user-based configuration thing. You go into, I think it's, if it's policies or preferences, map drive maps. You just go in, you say new map drive, and you'd say, do you want to replace it or do you want to create it? Again, replaced will just always overwrite whatever's there. Create will create it if it doesn't exist, and it won't touch it if it already exists. And then update means it'll only update the path if it does already exist. Okay, so that's basically that part of it. Let's see what else we got here. How much time we got left? We got 12 minutes. Let's go through this. Some of the shortcomings of group policy. You have to be on the UNH network or connected via the VPN. I'm working with, I think it's Brian. We're going to discuss getting Junos Pulse to authenticate via machine authentication, so that if users are off-site, you'll still be able to hopefully get all of these policy settings, because we have several users that are scattered across the country that machine-based authentication doesn't work for them because, or the group policy stuff doesn't apply to them because they're not on the UNH network. Software installations can only occur at startup, so that's not something that you have to deal with Configuration Manager. Configuration Manager downloads like a client, and it'll just work over the internet, over the public internet. So you may want to look into using ConfigMan for that kind of stuff. And sometimes some things like not working correctly, so you need to use GP result to figure out what the problem is. And sometimes it can just be more pain, but generally once you get it working, it's usually just something like small and minor and stupid that, like, oh, the policy was disabled or something like that, or it was applying to the wrong OU or security filtering. It's always something that, like, you're like, oh, I can't believe that I made that mistake. So how we leveraged it, we basically install a bunch of software. We install Lang Forefront, Go to Assist, and Spiceworks. We use it to install all of our printers. We use it for the wireless networks. We can use it to force encryption. So one of the things we're eventually going to do is set it up so that with PGP Universal Server, which is offered on campus, basically we can set it up so that it'll just deploy the MSI file and automatically encrypt the user's computer with full disk encryption and set up an encrypted network share for that person. We have specific HIPAA requirements for some of our programs, so having all of that stuff managed would be super, super helpful. Because right now it's just not in a managed environment, it's very problematic. Some tips and tricks. Use a virtual machine, so use either like Oracle VirtualBox or VMware, and just set up the different types of machines that are in your environment. And that way you can just go through and make sure that it's applying everything correctly. If you still got Windows XP machines, certain things like printers require like this executable that you install on them called like printer push. So you just may find that like certain things don't work on different environments. So it's always good to test this stuff before you deploy it out to your users. I like to have a secondary account just for my setup account that I log into, and then everything's all there, and my scripts and my shortcuts on my desktop and everything. I set that up using a roaming user profile. GP update will force the settings to, basically it doesn't make you wait that 90 minutes, it just updates them. It goes right out to the domain controller and says, hey, give me whatever settings you're doing. So if you're trying to test something, that's one way to do it. You can also use different toggle switches or different arguments. So if I go over here and just type in GP update, there's a bunch of different settings in here. So like you can boot will like automatically reboot the computer if it needs to. Force will just like force it to reapply everything regardless of whether or not it's already been applied, and that can sometimes be helpful in troubleshooting software or stuff like that. And just play with it. GP result has a bunch of different command lines too, so you can export it to HTML, or you can just see it, etc. What else we got? Oh, sorry, I already talked about using a script and just applying it to my users to figure out what the machine names are. This AD info tool is really, really great. It's by CJW Dev, but basically, I don't have time to go over it now, but it tells you like everything. If you need to like query like a bunch of computers or stuff like that, it's really, really helpful for just querying your different stuff within Active Directory. If you want to just mess around with it on your local machine and you guys don't have group like you don't have domains set up and all that stuff, you can just type in a command prompt. Just type in gpedit.msc, and this is my local group policy editor. So this is not attached to a domain controller, but it's this specific computer's group policy settings, and it will just control this specific settings on this specific computer. So it's good for just messing around with it and messing around with security settings, but I've never really used it. I usually just use the test OU over here. enable verbose logging. So we talked about that. That's all the messages at the beginning when your computer is turning on. Common problems that I run into. Check whether or not the group policy object is disabled. So if I have, let's see. So if you go into details here, just make sure that this is enabled, or that the specific part of the equation that you're looking at is actually enabled. Because if it's disabled, just nothing's going to apply. And so you just want to make sure that either, you can also disable the computer configuration or user configuration half. It may be a little bit faster, but I've kind of found that it's just better to leave everything as enabled, because you forget to enable the correct side of things and you're like, why isn't this working? And then you spend 20 minutes trying to figure it out when it was just, you could have just left it enabled. So I usually just leave it enabled. Does the GPO apply to this user? Oh, whoops. It'd be helpful if you guys can see this. Does the GPO apply to this user computer? So running GP result will tell you what group policy objects were applied to that computer. If we go over here, I think, we just go to the C drive. You can see what one looks like. I'll move this over here. We can see where it exists in like the OU. So it's in IOD, IOD test blocked. We can see which policies were applied. So this is the domain one, etc. You can see whether or not, actually this was denied. I don't know. I guess apparently they're not forcing it. No, that's news to me. But basically, this is very, very helpful in seeing why something is not applying as you would expect it to. And that's GP result. Ran on the command line. Has the computer been restarted 3 times, or have you ran GP update? Enable verbose messages and synchronous processing. Blah, blah, blah. Oh, this user profile service failed to log on. This is a problem that was affecting like one user every like 3 or 4 weeks, and I could not figure it out. And if your users ever start getting this error message, there's a hotfix from Microsoft that will fix it, and it will never be a problem again. And I looked like all over the place, and there's like instructions on how to reset the registry key that causes this problem, but I wanted to get it to stop coming up in the first place, and Microsoft has a hotfix, so I can send that information out. So it was super problematic. Also make sure that you can ping ad.unh.edu from both wired and wireless. Just because you can access websites doesn't necessarily mean that the MAC address was registered properly. So make sure that you can have connectivity to the domain controller. Additional resources. This book, Group Policy, Fundamental Security in the Managed Desktop, it's free on Safari Books, so as long as you're reading it on campus or you log in through UNH library, it has everything that you ever need to know about group policy. It was super, super helpful. When I started this job, I knew nothing about group policy, and I basically just read the book cover to cover, and now I know pretty much just about everything that I need to know about the policy and running this stuff. So that was a super, super helpful book. If you want to get good at this, I'd highly recommend reading that book. What else we got here? How else can you guys leverage group policy? If you have HIPAA compliance rules, it's super helpful for that. UNH secure deployment, installing printers, securing workstations, password reset tool. So one of the things I didn't really talk about much is expanding group policy. So there's also extensions that you can install. Every single thing that you do in group policy is ran by an extension, and your default set of extensions are like map drives, installed software, etc. You can also purchase or develop other extensions that bolt on to Active Directory. I think it's SpecOps makes a group policy object that like when you're logging into your computer and the person's account is disabled, it actually will allow it to put a little website there, so you can have the password reset tool just show up, and then users can just reset their password without needing to call the help desk, which would probably be super helpful. But regardless of what you guys are trying to do, if there's something that you're trying to do, chances are that somebody else has probably had the same problem, and somebody that was really frustrated just went ahead and made the tool. So just search for it and see if you can find it, and probably something super helpful. It probably already exists. What else do we got here? How else can UNH departments leverage Active Directory? So we didn't talk too much about Active Directory. But one of the nice things is that any system that supports lightweight directory access protocol, or LDAP, will work with Active Directory. So our internal help desk is linked up with Active Directory, and our intranet, actually, if you just go to the web page, to the IOD's intranet, we've configured it to use Kerberos authentication. So literally the person just goes and it authenticates whatever user they're logged into Windows as, which is kind of cool. So they don't even need to type in a username and password. It's just whatever they're set up on Windows as. And I always like single sign-on because passwords are a pain. Your mobile address phone book is up to date and searchable, which is kind of cool. A lot of people don't know this, but if you look at your contacts list and you just start typing in somebody's name, once you've linked up your phone with Exchange, it'll actually search Active Directory. So as long as you're keeping the global address list up to date, those contacts in your phone will be correct too, which is cool. And not a lot of people know this too, but Xerox has a function on their printers where you can integrate their the address book with LDAP. So basically, if you walk up to any one of our printers, you just type in the first few characters of the person's last name, and then you can scan something directly to any user at UNH, and it just works, and it's pretty seamless. All right. So that's about it. I'm going to really quickly show you guys how to install that program. I realize that I'm out of time here, but I just want to show you this real quick. Where is this computer? Oh, it's this one right here. So basically, after we installed that RSAT, we downloaded RSAT, and then you have to enable it. So what you do is you go into Control Panels, uninstall the program, turn Windows features on or off, and then you got to go in here and you got to go to it'll be in like Active Directory and Group Policy or something like that. And I think these instructions actually tell you how to do it. Yeah.
Why don't we wrap up there then?
Yep.
Yeah. And we'll keep the recording going. It is 2 o'clock. I want to be mindful of the time. And I just want to say thank you to everyone.
Thank you guys for coming.
And thank you to Casey Eyring. Put your hands together. As you can tell, the spirit of this is to share information, to try to make things more efficient at UNH and in your life. So if you have an idea to bring to these tech talks, let us know. Send me an email, and we'll get you guys set up. We'll probably do the next one in January, and then one during spring break, something like that. Maybe one in summer. Go around, maybe 4 a year, 5 a year, something like that. So, and thanks again to Holly for helping set this all up. So, thanks very much. Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions before we go?
I'd like to ask you what the biggest difference is between what you are able to do in the AD group policy versus the local machines group policy. What are the restrictions for the local machine policy?
I'm not actually sure because I don't use local group policy that often. And there's not really much reason that you would need to use it other than just like playing with it.
Well, except that there are machines on campus that aren't in an OU and probably won't get to an OU. They're not being maintained by
Yep.
the IT department. With that in mind, I know some professors that have their local policies set pretty stringently in the system. And one of the solutions that aren't in an OU and probably won't get to an OU, they're not being maintained by
Yep.
the IT department. With that in mind, I know some professors that have their